I consider the creation of the REA as one of the crowning achievements of my administration. In 1937, 2 years later, I was beginning my second term as President of the United States. The Depression was nearing an end, and although unemployment was still above 14%, there was much excitement in our nation. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco opened. John Steinbeck published the novel Of Mice and Men. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs hit theaters and becomes an instant classic. And baseball was our national pastime. Gas cost 10 cents a gallon, a loaf of bread was only 9 cents, and the average working person earned $35 a week. But in rural areas of this country, life was not quite so cheerful. Investor-owned power companies had electrified most of the urban areas but refrained from constructing power lines into sparsely populated rural areas, as there was not an adequate return on their investment. This left the countrysides in the dark. Rural residents had no electric power to help with the chores of daily living or for entertainment.
When I was growing up without electricity, years ago, we lived in the country. And we still had lamp light, and we didn't have inside plumbing.
We didn't ever expect to get electricity. And we thought that's the way it was going to be till the end.
We didn't even know about electricity until we got electricity.
I lived in the little city of Warwick, and we had electricity. But see, Dennis lived here, and they didn't have it. And I remember she gave us a junior and senior party when we finished school, and it was by candlelight.
We had a wood stove. We didn't have no running water. We had a well that had to draw your water. And like you say, we had an outdoor toilet, no indoor toilet.
I took my baths inside the house in a wash tub.
We done about half hour showering in the Flint River.
Mama cooked on the wooden stove, and it was my job to make sure that wood box was full of wood every day. And of course, it wasn't big wood and it wasn't heavy wood, but it was a lot of it. It took a lot to keep that thing going. But it was, I will say this about the old wood stove. In the wintertime, it was the best place in the world. When you come into that kitchen and go slip around in that corner behind that thing, it was the warmest spot in the world.
As rural citizens grew weary of waiting for electric power, they decided to help themselves with financing from the REA. Rural electric cooperatives sprang up all over the country. In Mitchell County, rural electrification efforts were spearheaded by Mr. C.F. Richards, the agriculture teacher at Hopeful High School. He was enthusiastically assisted by Mrs. Evelyn Cadle and a small group of local leaders that shared his vision. They spent much time and energy securing applications for service and right-of-way pledges. Numerous trips to Washington, D.C. were required.
And the first meeting was in Mr. Richards' office at Hopeful, and who was there was P.J. Cadle, who was my brother-in-law, and my daddy, David West, and Mr. Richards and me. That was the first meeting. And they got all that group together, Mr. Scarborough, the congressman, and all that. They went to Washington because to go before the REA board. It wasn't called EMC then, you know.
That's
It
right.
was REA in lifetime. We got, I think it was less than $100,000 from Washington to start off on. Now that sounds like nothing, but honey, then that was money.
That was millions back then, I mean.
That was money. 1937, that was money.
David West was my daddy. He just had one name. He said there was 12 of them, and they couldn't afford 2 names for each. So he was on the first board, or the group that went to Washington to meet Congressman Cox and Charlie Martin and everybody to see if we could get a appropriation for line here in Camilla.
I do appreciate, and I did always love Mr. Richards, but I really appreciated him more growing up because he really worked hard for this rural electrification program, and he was a very dedicated person.
On October 16, 1937, Mitchell Electric Membership Corporation was incorporated. 32 miles of power lines were built, and the first consumer to receive electricity was Mr. Timothy Catchings, a local farmer that lived just outside Camilla.
Oh, it didn't take but a few hours to get one pole up. And I watched them when it was just joy to me to see them put it up at my house. Oh, it meant everything, you might say.
Life in southwest Georgia was changing slowly but surely. It took strength of mind, body, and spirit to electrify the countryside.
I started with Mitchell EMC then in 1945. I was 22. And of course, I was there. Nathan Cadle was the first manager. And then after Nathan went into the construction business, then Ernie Smith was hired as the manager. I dug holes by hand. I cut right away by hand. We set a lot of poles by hand. When I started, there were two rates, residential rates. The dollar rate was 10 cents per kilowatt hour, all the way through, regardless of how much you used.
Well, I climbed a lot of poles for 90 cents an hour. I started off at 80 cents an hour here. I dug 1,000,000 holes per hole diggers. And when you see the fire fly from a rock or something, you hear it down there.
I love to work, and a challenge was good. When it comes to climbing poles, they didn't get too high.
Yes, I've been on the board that one of the main objects is to keep the lights on, keep the cost down, and give people knowledge about things that they can do and help themselves.
By 1951, the number of consumers approached 6,000. The Rural Electric Leaders Program, one of the first in the nation, was created to develop a grassroots organization to assist in educating consumers and to foster communication between the cooperative and the growing number of owner members.
I think the Leaders Program, I truthfully can say, it's been one of the best things that ever happened to Mitchell EMC. As far as I was concerned, they were our ambassadors.
I have enjoyed it because, I love people, and you get to know these ladies fairly well, and then you learn so much.
Mitchell EMC's service area expanded to include 14 counties in southwest Georgia. Electrical equipment and appliances were readily available. The countryside had been electrified.
My most indelible memory that I have is of the day that the electricity was turned on at the house. That night, my daddy and my mama turned on every light in that house. And we all walked out to, it was about 50 yards out in front of the house where was a little knoll, little hill. And we looked back at the house, and it was shining like a jewel in the night. I mean, it was just a beautiful sight.
It's such a privilege to have electricity. And I always wanted it all my life, and when I got it, I was so thankful for it.
It really made a big difference, but yet, when you think about it, those single light bulbs hanging down the middle of each room, they didn't put off a lot of electricity.
Electricity came on and it was completely changed, and it changed our way of doing and thinking.
Of course, we do everything with electricity now. Shave and brush our teeth and whatever. So we couldn't live without it now.
I tell you, when lights go out on a storm or something, we in a mess. We depend on electricity for about everything, you know that?
I'm glad that I have lived long enough to see all these changes, and it's fantastic.
Best thing ever happened for country folk.
I like some of the good old days, but I like the memories of some of them. But no, I don't want to go back to the good old days.
Rural southwest Georgia was finally enjoying the comforts and privileges electricity provided. Today, 75 years later, nearly 25,000 consumers are served with 5,500 miles of power lines, enough to go to Portland, Oregon and back. The co-op has grown to 82 employees and 9 local directors that remain committed to the cooperative spirit and the consumer members of Mitchell EMC.
I've never lived without electricity. I've only read about it in the history books, but I know I don't want to try it. I'm thankful for President Roosevelt and those early pioneers, their vision and their efforts that brought electricity to the rural areas.
Working with antique wood and seeing these old mills, how they was put together, and a lot of it done without electricity, without planer mills and forklifts and everything else that goes along with it. I just can't hardly imagine doing my business. I don't even know if I'd be in this business without electricity.
I sit here today because of the fulfillment of hopes and dreams that started in Hopeful, Georgia over 75 years ago with Mr. Richards and a group of forward-thinking people. I know that y'all been doing some interviews of folks that can remember prior to electricity. Although I'm bald, I'm not quite that old, I don't remember that. But I tell you what I do remember. I remember when 311 and 65 were dirt roads. I remember 8-party telephone lines when little boys like me had to hang up every time an adult wanted to phone. I remember sitting in the road waiting for the rolling store, and that was the only way I got a candy bar and a Coke. There's so many things have changed in technology and over the years, but one thing has not changed, and that's been the quality of the service and the dedication of the personnel of what you guys call Mitchell EMC that us country folks still call REA.
I seen a lot of changes in my lifetime. Electricity was one of the best.
The outside workers was the best that I ever dealt with in my lifetime. Can't ask for no better. They've done an outstanding job. Over the 49 years we've been out here, they've come a long ways.
Thanks to Mitchell EMC for your commitment and investment in our communities and our future.
Mitchell EMC was a great partner, and like I said, I'd worked with several different electric companies around, and the pricing and the quality of the service and everything was great.
Mitchell EMC has done a fantastic job.
It's the consistency of the quality of the service and the personal touch and concern of Mitchell EMC employees that has always impressed me, and I think we got the best one in the United States.
I loved REA, honey. It was just in my blood.
Hello, I'm Tony Tucker, President and CEO of Mitchell EMC. For 75 years, our history and progress have been intertwined with the growth and development of our member consumers and the communities in the 14 counties that Mitchell EMC serves. Many thanks go to those innovative co-op pioneers and the leaders of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We continue to embrace that cooperative spirit that brought light to the rural countryside. And while we celebrate this milestone with you today, be assured our focus is on the future, and we look forward to meeting each new challenge with the same success as our predecessors.
Congratulations on 75 years and counting.